noise.
Welcome back to the next part of this Truth and Rhythm episode. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. Also become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you so much for your interest and support. Enjoy.
Was there any issue or friction? Because my understanding is Paul didn't leave under the best of terms, when he kind of parted ways. So was there anything that you kind of had to get over related to that, or was it no big deal?
Prince and I never, that was between he and Paul. And, and I'm sure Paul told you the story. I felt bad for both parties. I mean, at that time when Paul decided to leave Prince, because, Paul's got his own thing, man. He really did have his own thing. He could go and do great stuff, and MCA recognized, and they offered him a big deal, and he took it. And I know that was a sore spot for Prince, and because Prince was going to make him a big star, or so he thought, another protege band, and I was a little leery of Paul leaving that too, even though he was getting paid $5 a week or whatever the frick it was, it was awful. So when you're a kid and you get offered something like that from a big major label, of course you're going to take it. You're a kid, first of all. What does he know? And it's like, I remember talking to Paul about it, going, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I encouraged him, of course, to do his own thing, of course, because he was so good at it, So I don't know. That was a strange thing. So, but yeah, I'd still bring Paul around the studio, but Paul was you'd hide in the corners and stuff. I would just bring him in the studio and we would sit there, and Prince would probably usually had no idea he was there, but I don't think he would have kicked him out, because he knew what the talent was. He loved him, man. Bottom line. So
I remember, from the outside as a fan, I was like looking at the liner notes and things like I always did and saying, wait, Paul's gone. Who's it? There's another Peterson,
Yeah, right. Well, Paul was the one that really got in there first, even though I was there before Paul was, when we were rehearsing in 90 or 77 and 78. I'd go to the rehearsals and jam with him, for years. And that's when we kind of parted ways, but then Paul kind of got in there, and so did my little nephew Jason. And Jason got in there in the later 80s, and Prince loved him too, man. He thought he was great, and we just we made it a family affair. Why not, And because he played with, I think it was, did he play with Tamara in the Scene, or did? Oh no, he. God, who did Jason play with? I don't remember. It was.
I'm not sure. It was Tamara in the Scene was a Jesse Johnson protege.
No, yeah, that's right. That's very true. No, this was the singer. It was one of Prince's girlfriends.
Carmen Electra.
Yeah, it's Carmen. That's what it was, Carmen.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm geezing, man. I can't remember everything.
Hey, we'll get through it together somehow, one way or another.
I'm surprised I can remember half of this shit. So there you go.
What would you say was the most amazing or fascinating thing that you saw Prince kind of do in a studio, or anything that maybe not a lot of people saw that you were able to be privy to?
A lot of people weren't privy to any of it because he would do it by himself. He would do a lot of that stuff by himself, man. And I don't remember the most. I think the biggest thing that I will tell you that I got to see him do was rehearse on stage in the sound stage, and we were the only ones that could come and see him. Me and La Puma, Howard Hewitt. I'll never forget. Just the three of us. They'd set up a couple 3 chairs, and he would be rehearsing his show. And I'll never forget another anecdote. It was pretty funny, man. I walk in and I always kind of wore these flamboyant, loud ass shirts and stuff, man. And and I remember walking in, and we said it was Howard Hewitt, me and Tommy LaPuma, because Tommy and I were producing Howard Hewitt. We came in, sat down to watch part of the set, because he said, of course you can come in anytime you want, just come on and sit down. So we walked in there and he said, wait, hold it, wait, hang on, band, stop the band. You got to tell Peterson to turn down a shirt. He's way too fucking loud. From 85, 100, 200 feet, man. We were like, in big chairs out there just lounging, and and I have this loud ass shirt on. He just had to give me shit about it, which was of course what he did very well. He did that with everybody. He was very funny. He could be very funny and very condescending. But overall funny, man. He was a funny son of a gun. So
did you get much exposure to any of the other people that were close to him, like in his bands, like MPG members? And, I think you mentioned already Morris Hayes. But were there any of those guys you worked with, Michael Bland and Levi? Are there one or two of those guys that just have kind of blew your socks off in terms of, what they can bring?
Oh, gosh, yes. Of course, Michael Bland was always somebody that I knew before he worked with Prince. I worked with him with a guy by the name of Hiram Bullock, and that was the guitar player that I was working with David Sanborn at the time. And Hiram was doing records for A&M also that I was co-producing with him because he loved what I did too. So I said, well, I got a drummer for you. Even though we had Steve Jordan and we had Charlie Drayton, who were some of the greatest drummers out of New York, I said, you got to hear this kid play. And it was mostly doing live stuff when he would come to Minneapolis and do stuff. And Michael was 16 years old, 17 years old, and just blew me away, man, with his talent. And he had chops and he had perfect pitch, the poor bastard. And anybody with perfect pitch, I say, the poor thing, because everything's out of tune, But he was so over the top, beautiful, and such the nicest kid and loving and just unbelievable. And yes, go on. He was the one that stuck out the most. And then the Hornheads. And then Levi, of course, was always playing with Prince. And Levi would come up, he would play bass on stuff, and he would also play these guitar parts. He played on my records, like you saw, because I loved his playing, man. I mean, so we've got to have him. He'd talk about bringing shit to the party. These guys would come up with parts that are so hip, man. It was like, you got to have them, really. So we were very, very blessed to have those guys hanging around the studios, man, because, once Prince didn't have his gloms on him, we could go, come on, come in here, I'll pay you. Because we were doing major label records, so they could come in and get paid a little bit more, So
I think Hiram was part of, and a lot of those guys you mentioned were part of that David Sanborn group. They had that weekend TV show for a while in like the late 80s.
They did,
where they were doing really cool stuff
called Night Music. Music. It was what's our guy's name that does Saturday Night Live? Lorne Michaels. It was a Lorne Michaels / Michelob induced show that really it was such a great, what did they do? They do 3 seasons or something like that. And I was floored that they could get by with that many, because it was so eclectic, man. It was so many different things. Jules Holland was on it, and from Squeeze at that time. And it was one of those things that was just so cool to put all these people together that never played together before. Miles with somebody else, I mean,
Bootsy was on there, all kinds of people.
Everybody. I mean, they have those available now too, I think, those shows. So if you guys are interested in checking it out, it's on YouTube too. A lot of it is, but the shows, I think you can buy a package of them. So, but it's cool. Yeah. They were all on absolutely. Marcus Miller, yeah. So
Back to your 99 record Souvenir, I got to mention Ignorance is Bliss. That's a really...
I did that one in New York with my New York buddies. It was Rocky Bryant on drums, who would have that great drum sound, man. It was kind of like the bonk snare. That was pretty cool. We always liked that. And it was Hiram and me, and no, it was Dean Brown. Dean Brown was the guitar player on that one, and that was it was just one of those things. Another one that we wrote in the studio together. I gave him all, writing credit because I had a concept, and then those guys added some really cool shit. So I said, well, if something happens with it, you'll get something from it, So I gave him writing credit, and it was just one of those funky ass songs that we. I could have put the Hornheads on it because the Hornheads and I did a bunch of stuff together, and that's why Prince loved the Hornheads. Because I put them on everything.
Did you connect it? You made him aware of the Hornheads, or? I
think I did a little. I was part of the deal. Yeah, no doubt about it. Because we have, I think yes, and I think he probably made that name up. Because they weren't the Hornheads at the time. They were just a horn section that actually played together in different bands and stuff. And I loved them. So I know Mike Nelson was a friend of mine. And Mike was a great arranger, and he would come in and do that stuff, and he played on all my shit. So Prince just went, okay, come on, you're playing on mine. So, but I think it was kind of a mutual thing. It's around the same time back in the 80s, I mean 90s, early 90s.
Well, because they played with him much later even too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Still, well, now they're playing with Corey Wong. Corey Wong?
Yeah. Yeah, he's hot. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he's a hot new dude, man. So,
Sonny Thompson was also on that record too, right? Souvenir made an appearance.
Which one?
Sonny Thompson, was he on Souvenir?
Oh, Sonny, of course.
Yeah,
Sonny was always he was a force, another force, man. He played on a song called Drop Shot, and that was he added a lot, man. Sonny adds a lot to everything, but man, his bass playing. I don't think he played bass. I think Paul played bass, but he played guitar on it, and it was just. That was another one. I did the same thing as Ignorance is Bliss. I gave everybody, because they brought so much to the party. How can you not? You can't just go, yeah, thanks a lot, and here's $100. No, I'm gonna hook you up. If something happens with it, you'll get paid. It'll be a nice day at the mailbox. So, and they did okay. I mean, they saw money from it.
When Drop Shot on that live record just a couple of years ago,
yeah.
Really nice live record. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, man. That's the WDR Orchestra out of Cologne, Germany. That was what an honor to be able to do that, man. That was quite a thing. And of course, I hauled my little brother Paul with me because he's my right-hand man. He's my wingman, So, and the drummer that usually works with David Sanborn and I, Gene Lake, was the drummer on that too, and he's wonderful with the big band. So, and that big band needed a little kick in the butt with that funk, So
yeah, well, there's more in common between big band and funk than some people may know. I think. I mean, they can blend together nicely if you know how to do it right.
They can, but big bands always used to kind of be a little bit behind the beat because it's always swinging more, But this kind of stuff is more Tower of Power-y. That needs to kind of be a little more specific, And they came to the party with a vengeance. I mean, they're the baddest cats on the planet. So, I had the baddest rhythm section that I could get together for that.
Where was that one recorded?
We're in Cologne, Germany. In the actual.
It was in Cologne.
Yeah, it was in Cologne. And then we went and did a couple of concerts with it, and that was about the size of it. But it's just one of those things that it's an honor to do. For some people, it turns out to be a nice thing to have a feather in your cap. You know what I mean?
You also did some work with Steve Miller. Is that right?
Me and my two brothers worked with Ben Sidrid with Steve Miller in 88 through 93. So we had a good 5-year run with him, man. And yeah, oh man, we barely remember those years. Those were fun days, man. And never regret it. We're still friends to this day. And he's a good dude, man. He's a kind of a Cub Scout leader, Boy Scout leader guy, and we have a good time with him, man. We heckle him a lot. So
It must be a blast of playing that catalog.
Oh my God. Well, we kind of got him back into it because I'll tell you how we got to know Steve Miller is when Ben Sidran was going to produce his last record for Capitol, and he wanted to do a jazz record. He wanted to play jazz, so it was a jazz funk, kind of a funk jazz rendition of The Last Hurrah for him, and it was Steve's. He thought it was his last hurrah. He was just going to go quit and be done, with the thing. And Sidran went, "Oh no, you can't do that, man. Let's go play a couple of college gigs behind this record." And of course, Steve got the bug again. And in 1988, we went and played a few college towns, and of course, they didn't want to hear what we were doing. They didn't want to hear the jazz stuff, the Born to Be Blue record. They wanted to hear all his old stuff. And this is the beginning of classic rock. It was like the beginning of when classic rock became popular again. So that, he knew that was going to be another thing, man. So actually he said, "Okay, you really want to do this? Yep, let's do it." So he put all of us in a band together because it was me and my family, Billy, Paul, and me, and Ben Sidran, a guy by the name of Bob Malik on saxophone, and Gordy Knutson on drums. And we're all Minnesota boys, except for Bob Malik and Sidran, of course. Sidran's from Madison, but Bob is from New York. But that was the conglomeration of guys that we had, and he loved it. And we were together, and the classic rock. The story behind Steve Miller's thing is he got all his publishing back from Capitol because they thought he was all washed up and done. So what he did is he put together 3 different greatest hit records, which sold more than the originals. So they became way more famous than with the younger crowd and the classic rock lovers. So he ended up still touring today, of course, behind all the same songs we played back then. And it's wonderful, man. Are you kidding me? And he got the bug so bad. And we did that for, like I said, 5 years. And I think one of the last gigs I played with him was with Paul McCartney at the Hollywood Bowl in 1993. I think it was 3 or 2, I can't remember. But anyways, there you go. There's a little Steve Miller history for you.
Wow. Yeah, it was great to see him go back to some of his roots and things. I think a lot of people that knew all those pop rock hits, they, weren't so up on the fact that he was so steeped in, blues and roots music. And
he's a definite blues guy, man. I think he's from Texas, right? Because where he was born, anyway. But those guys all knew each other from going to school together. I think they were in college together. He, Boss Skaggs, Steve, and Ben Sidran. I think all went to Madison. Madison College, Madison State or whatever it is, and that's all. They all knew each other. So, and they all played together, for years, and the West Coast anyway. Well, it's a small world, but it's a big one.
You mentioned stepping back for a second, Chaka Khan's record. Did you actually do any work? Did you meet and interact with Chaka at all, or just work on the recording?
I worked on the recording during that time. I didn't have any connection with her as far as producing her vocals or anything. They were pretty much done. I ended up taking the songs that had been done already and redoing them and doing my thing to them. But I had played with her before at the Montreux Jazz Festival, so I knew her. Whether or not she remembered me or not, I doubt. But I had connections with her beforehand and after. But not on that particular record. It was just me doing my thing on 2 or 3 songs, So,
what about Mavis or Rosie? Did you?
Rosie, of course, I worked with her very closely, and Mavis I worked closely with also. But that was another Prince rendition of stuff. I would do Rosie's was more of me. I did more of me on that. Prince didn't really do much on that. There was like 2 or 3 songs that I did by myself and had the rhythm sections and all that stuff, which was pretty much his rhythm section, with me, Michael Bland, and Paul, and Levi, and the Hornheads, and I had the Minnesota Orchestra come and play on it. And it was a big production thing that I did for Herb. And Mavis stuff was done pretty much. And I came in and kind of reiterated it for him and made it into something else, I made it into a little different vibe that he loved. And that was kind of my first bone that he gave me was Mavis, and he loved what I did. It was, see what you can do with this kind of thing. And Mavis and I were thick as thieves. We had so much fun. I just played with her again last March.
That's
and
awesome.
I wish I could have shot you some pictures, but we did a thing called God's Love We Deliver, which is like a Meals on Wheels thing in New York that we do like a telethon / fundraiser that has a bunch of people that come through there. And she was one of them last year. And we reconnected pretty hard. She just was the sweetest singer in the world. And now she's on the tour with opening for Bonnie Raitt all over the world, or all over the United States now. So,
Wow. I just heard, I don't know if you have heard or know, but Buddy Guy, God bless him too.
Yeah.
His new album's out, and there's a duet on there with Mavis.
oh,
So that's
cool.
pretty cool. Yeah.
That's really cool. Good, man. I don't know if I've heard that yet, but I'd love to.
What female singer out of all the ones you worked with really just knocked your socks off?
Bonnie.
Yeah.
Bonnie's one of my favorite, man. I mean, of course, Mavis has got a whole thing, and I think Bonnie got a lot of stuff from Mavis. And I mean, as far as singers, and my sister Patty, who I love, and Linda, my other sister, who I love, I can't leave them out. Linda is another marvelous musician. She's my oldest sister, plays really great jazz piano and sings her ass off. But Patty, my sister, and we've done a lot of recordings together. So I can truthfully say that she's probably one of my favorites. But Bonnie is the one that always knocked me out, really. Another woman by the name of Melanie Rosales is another one that is a local girl that sings her butt off, kind of on the same vein as Bonnie. And but these girls who have got this real soulful, and Tamara, who's Tamara, Margaret Cox was we were in bands together for years with Melanie. The TC Jammers, we were the two, they were the two front singers, and they were just marvelous together, man. I mean, these girls can sure, no doubt about it. But to be on the road with and having fun with and doing that stuff in the bigger picture of things was Bonnie for sure.
I first saw her all the way back in the 70s opening for Aerosmith.
Oh yeah! Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a blast from the past. When was that? In the 80s?
No, late 70s.
Late 70s. Wow. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, she didn't really have any big hits then, but except for a couple of kind of she had maybe a couple of them for sure.
Very interesting to see her career progress after that and see how much acclaim she got later on. But yeah,
no doubt. Well, I love her to death, and I'm in touch with her weekly. So pretty fun.
Were you surprised when Prince covered one of her tunes on Emancipation?
Not really, because he loved her. He thought Bonnie was the bee's knees, man. He really did. So I think that was a big shot in the arm for Bonnie too, And it's just, it's a love relationship. Prince loved her. Absolutely, no doubt.
Well, I know he wrote some songs he hoped she would do, and I guess she didn't, but those finally came out on that deluxe Sign of the Times last year.
Right. I remember hearing about it, but there you go. That's what happened. She's probably kicking herself a little bit behind that one, but
let's talk about your most recent record with your brothers, Under the Radar.
Under the Radar.
How and why, and
you know what? I just said we haven't done this, and we should just go do it. And it was 5 years ago, I think it was, when we did it. And I was at a place called the Grove in. Do you know the Bohemian Grove? Have you heard of this? It's a strange place, man. It's a place where it's a campground in Northern California, and it's where all these political things have been done and all this stuff. But we went there to play music, and I was there with a friend of mine, Jerry Lopez. Jerry Lopez is a wonderful band in Vegas, and he belongs to this thing, and it's kind of a Republican-oriented place, and it was way before Donald Trump when we did this thing. But I met a guy who ran Greg Fields. He runs Concord Records. Okay, here we go. So at the Bohemian Grove, I met this guy by the name of Greg Fields, and he's a great jazz drummer. And he said, "Well, why don't you go do something?" And I said, "Right," because he knew who we were, the Peterson family, which was unbeknownst to me. And I said, "You know what? Okay." He said, "Yeah, send it to me." And so I was excited as hell. I went, "Okay, Billy." As soon as we got home from that grove, which happens at the beginning of June, I said, "We're going to the studio and we're going to cut a record that just the four of us. Paul, you're playing drums. Billy, you're upright. I'm going to play B3, and my nephew Jason's going to play saxophone." So we all came in with a couple of grooves and sat there and wrote this in 3 days, man, all that stuff. And I refined it afterwards because I was producing on it, and I arranged it and actually mixed it also, and put it. We didn't do too many overdubs. Paul played some guitar, on a couple of things because he's such a great guitar player too. Son of a gun. But he played drums on it because he and Billy have this great feel together. And of course, when we get together as Petersons, we already have our own feel, And it just turned out wonderful. And I sent it to Concord. I sent it to Blue Note. I sent it to a couple other people. They weren't here. They didn't really get it. But I gave it to my guy with the WDR Orchestra in Cologne, Germany, Joachim Becker. And he loved it. Of course, the Europeans love this stuff. It gets way more acknowledgement over there and in Europe and in Asia than any place. And of course, he signed it right away and put it out, and it turned out like what you've heard. And I know you said you liked it, Scott. Thank you. And it got played, man. I sent it in to a few different people. I've got a few guys that I work with. Bud Harner is one of the other guys I work with. I don't know if you know that name, but he was an A&R guy for Warner Brothers for years, and he loved the record. So he said, "Give it to me. I'll run with it." And he ran with it, and they played under the radar right away on all the jazz stations, and especially on Sirius Satellite, where it pays the most money, by the way. And we love them for that. But they played it 12 times a week. They loved it. So we're going to go in and do another one. No doubt. They want to hear some more of that, so we're going to go do that. That's our goal, is to go do that around the world.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I just want to mention some highlights for me because I like to do that. First off, the organ and the sax, just fantastic throughout, especially.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm sure and you have some tributes on here too. You mentioned the Mr. Williams as a tribute, but you got some on here which are maybe more musical, like one for Horace, and right. I'm not sure who Peter is for, but.
Yeah, Peter was a good friend of ours. I wrote that for Peter Shimke, as a piano player who passed in 2020. Was a huge loss. He's a great, great jazz pianist. And we lost him in 2020. And right away, I just said, well, because Peter and I would work in the studio a lot, he really wanted to do some folk stuff together before we left. And when I left to go do the WDR thing, I think I was gone it was something else I was doing. The Mick Fleetwood thing. I was doing a Mick Fleetwood thing, a tribute to Peter Green. Did you check that out? You might want to check that out, Scotty. That's a thing that I was a musical director on too.
But I'm a big Peter Green fan, though. So.
Okay, go look that up. That was a whole thing that we did. We did a movie and DVDs, and I got vinyl on it. I'll even send you one if you want. Wow. Anyways, when I was gone, Peter died during the time I was gone doing that. So I came back, and everybody was devastated, of course. So I wrote that song for Peter. One for Horace is for Horace Silver. Billy wrote that one. And most of the other stuff we all just kind of made up in the studio.
Well, Fred Lip, is that
Fred Lip is just a blues song that we wrote for a friend of ours who passed away too, man. It's just like tributes to these guys, guys that were not necessarily huge influences in our lives, but our friends, there are friends that we have to remember somehow, and just that's a cool tune, huh? Fred Lip. Then we do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you really got some great organ work on that one, especially.
Thank you, brother.
But just, there's so many highlights throughout because most of it is just really good, funk flavored jazz, with prominent B3 and some sax mixed in. And
upright bass playing
acoustic
with Paul
bass,
on drums, man. It's such a cool groovy, and Jason just plays the heck out of the alto, man. He just sounds so great. Everybody really came to the party, so we'll do it again for sure.
Yeah, you think in 2023, or is that something we can look forward to?
Absolutely. Yep, we'll do it again, and I'll have Jakob put it out again too, because he did a wonderful job.
Wow, look forward to that for sure. Great. And you mentioned about Paul putting a little guitar in there. Yeah, a little George Benson-ish.
Absolutely.
A couple of spots,
That's his mentor. That's Paul's favorite guy in the world, of course. But Paul can do all sorts of different stuff. You can sound like Prince, for God's sakes. He's got all that real funk stuff down too. But this called for that kind of George Benson octavey kind of stuff and blues. It's just the blues pretty much. We love the blues. So
especially Blue Cadillac is real bluesy.
That's Paulie's too. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, that's the only vocal song on the record, which is a little strange, but it got played too. People love that one. So
yeah, I could see like B.B. King, jumping on one like that.
Yeah, right.
What would you say is like your, signature playing style? How would somebody maybe, say, hey, I think that's Ricky P. That's got that touch.
You know what? I think would be the B3, just enhancing the song with things I call wheelie ups and wows, and it's just taste. It's to taste. I when I play the B3, I try to be as tasteful as possible. It doesn't have to be super choppy. It doesn't have to be play fast playing and all sorts of stuff. But it's either got to be super funky or super tasty, man. That's my motto, and that's what I try to strive for. That's my goal on anybody's record who calls me to do it. And I did a lot of records back in the 90s for all the smooth jazz guys, because that was a big deal back then. From 93 on to still up to these dates, I'm still doing record dates for these guys, and writing songs for them. So, because it's just some of the stuff is, some of the stuff is horrible, but some of it is really good too. Not the stuff that I did, but you can hear some things on certain stations and you just go, wow, what was that? But then there's other stuff you go, wow, that was very cool. There's such great musicians out there. It's but anyways, that's kind of my striver. So,
what would you say for you is a key, and for other aspiring keyboard players who might be listening or watching this? What's the key to being able to deliver what's called for, regardless of genre?
Listening. I think the key is listening to other people play, learning. Turn your ears on. Make sure you know what you're saying, and listening to the players around you. And that is the biggest thing. I can't strive that enough. I can't state that enough. That's my thing. Is a big deal. Is you make sure that you're playing together with the other cats and not stepping on one another. That's my biggest fear of going into here and having to shut other people up. Stop playing that right now. It's listening to other people and gelling with them. And that's the biggest thing I can say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fear some of that is lost with it being such a production medium and people recording in isolation and not getting together on stage and really playing off each other so much.
No doubt. But there are guys who feel that inside, even doing that and being separated, can do that and come off like it's live. They really can, because I've done it. I've done it with some great musicians. So, I mean, they're some of the best in the world that get that, you know. But for upcoming people, upcoming kids that are playing music, you know, that is the key, is to listening to what's going on around you, you know, and learning from it and being tasteful with what you're doing. So that's the bottom line, you know.
Ricky, what would you say are one or two of the most unforgettable memories you've had from touring or being on the road, or a particular show for whatever reason, good or bad?
Well, the most recent one I can tell you about is doing the Peter Green thing. That was a big thing for me. I mean, that was a genre of music that was lost a little bit back in the day, because if anybody knows Fleetwood Mac, that's where they came from. Fleetwood Mac was a blues band, and blues was the key. And Peter Green was a wonderful blues player and writer, and he's revered by many of the top rock guitar players all over the world. And the tribute that we did do, for me, in my highlight, besides the other one, was of course playing with Sadao and being able to put that band together and having those great players that I played with for years. But this one is the most recent one, and it had so many different guitar players that I dealt with as far as putting the music together with Mick and doing this thing with them was a pure pleasure and a pure labor of love, and such great players: Pete Townsend, David Gilmour, Kirk Hammett, you know, I mean, Johnny Lang, Rick Vito, you know, so many people, man, you're just going to freak out. You know, Billy Gibbons, you know, it's like, really? All the people are playing on stage at one time, man. I mean, it's very, very cool, man. And it was really fun to do. So that's a big thing. But I got one other thing I have to tell you is playing with my family. I think that's probably the biggest deal. And that's the most thrilling part of watching my family, what they do, and seeing them, the gift that they've got, you know. So,
did you get to go to Twins games whenever you wanted to?
When Dad invited us, sure. Yeah. And it was, that would talk about cool stuff. That was, and watching Dad play the organ for the Twins all the time. And we were in the same booth as this guy by the name of Bob. Oh God, what was his name? He was the announcer. He announced all the Twins as they were going up to bat. And he was a big fan, big Twins fan. And all he did was cuss off mic, of course. He would be so mad when they were doing. But we were in the same booth with him. And, but going to games, we did all the time, man. We were very, very fortunate.
How far was that, when Harmon Killebrew was still around, or after that? Or
Harmon Killebrew, Rod Carew, Tony Oliva, Zoilo Versalles. I mean, back in the 60s. I mean, it was all 62 through 69.
It was Denny McLean?
73, you know, when Mom played for him, too. So
Al Kaline. Yeah, I'm thinking of, no, that's the Tigers. No, that's the Tigers. That's the Tigers.
Bob Allison, absolutely, man.
And later Kirby Puckett.
But Jim Cott, holy buckets, man. It's all the baddest, all the greatest guys. I was even selling at 13 years old. I was selling pennants because we were in the pennant race. I'll never forget them losing. I was so sad. You know, it was one of those sad things, but I was waving the pennants and selling them. And they were losing so bad. It was like I would sit down and just sulk. You know? It was fun, man. 13 years old. I'll never forget it.
When we lost Prince 6 years ago now.
Yeah, wow. Already 6 years, man.
I know, it's incredible, right? I feel like we never did lose him because he's just with us no matter what. But
exactly right.
Were you as surprised as I was with the outpouring of love globally that showed up with, you know, lighting up buildings in purple and things like that? I mean,
it was overwhelming, man. It was an overwhelming love experience, but, you know, I only wish he could have seen it, which he did, I'm sure, you know. Yeah, I mean, if, you know what, I have to tell you, when we found out that was happening, I actually gathered all the people that I knew that were playing with him at the time, or that had played with him, the Sonny Thompsons, all the guys that were playing with him, brought him to a bar so they wouldn't get hounded by the press. And we sat in a bar in a corner and ate and hugged and loved and did a whole thing the day he passed away. I'll never forget it, just to keep away from the paparazzi. And of course, it was overwhelming, man. It was such an outpouring of love and affection for the guy. And it was an incredible, horrible, incredible experience. I mean, for Kirk Johnson to find him, KJ was devastated, man, and was his right-hand guy, man. That was his best friend. So that was a tough one. That was a tough one to handle. But yes, I enjoyed watching that, man. It was due for him, Not that he passed, but the outpouring of love was due.
Yeah, it was. I felt a little bittersweet about it because I was kind of like, where were some of these people the past 10 or 20 years when they were saying he's not done Purple Rain again?
Exactly right, man. That's exactly right. Where the hell were you 5 minutes ago?
Yeah.
Where were you 10, 20 years ago? When this shit should have been happening. Yeah, well, he lost touch with all that scene, man. I think a lot has to do with when he was, when he and Maite and they lost a kid, and that was discouraging for him. I think in a way that he had to reinvent himself, and when he came out with that record, that funky ass record, what's it called? Musicology. That I think would give us a little bit of a resurgence for him, and a new genre of stuff to history that was being made, even though it wasn't as popular as it could have been. It could have been way more popular, I would say. But I don't think he cared. I think he just was enjoying life at that time, man. I really do. And he was able to express himself so well in that genre of music, that was his deal, man. So, and he made it right. No doubt about it.
When was the last time that you saw him?
The night before he passed away.
Really?
Yep. We went to the Dakota Club in downtown Minneapolis to see, I can't remember the name of the singer. Great, kind of a jazzier R&B, soulful black woman, and just killing, man. It was wonderful. And I saw his head walk in and go up to his perch, and I kind of caught his eye, and he gave me a little heads up, and he went up to his perch up on the second floor, and that was the last time I saw him. The next morning I got the call. I mean, he was there the night before. He looked fine. He had a big fro and the glasses, and I mean, I hadn't seen him in years, but he saw us and gave us a little nod. So that was about it. And so it was like, when we found that out, it was pretty sick, man. It made everybody pretty sick, to hear that. But then just weeks before that, he was dead. They couldn't. They were trying to revive him, in the plane, and that Chicago ride or whatever he was doing, they had to land the plane somewhere. So I had no idea what was going on. I knew he was in pain, but
Why did you stop collaborating with him?
We just lost touch, man. After the Paisley Park thing, I think was getting a little tired for him. He was saying people were stealing from him, he thought, and I'm sure somebody was, but the only people that were allowed into Paisley Park were Tom Tucker and I back then in the beginning he was paranoid. And this was when Maite was pregnant, before he found out that the child, he was going to lose that child and whatever, after he lost him. I think that was a kind of a thing, like I told you before, that just kind of shut him off for a minute. And nobody was allowed, and everything stopped. Everything stopped for a while, man. I mean, it was, he lost touch with everybody at that point, except for a few key people, in his life that were still keeping him together as far as whatever was going on. But I'm sure it was devastating to him and all that. But that's when we lost touch, was, back in 96, 7, something like that. But we always, we never kept in touch that much. We never really talked to each other, but still, I know there was mutual respect for each other. So, and I'm sorry to say we didn't work together anymore, but he sure had great musicians in his band. He found all those great cats,
Yeah.
He's good.
Ricky, before I let you go, I like to ask guests to pick 5 desert island albums. So, if you could only have 5 records for the rest of time and none that you're on, what are the most important 5 records that you would need to still be able to hear?
Oh boy. Tarkus by Ursula Palmer. Thrust by Herbie Hancock. Feel by George Duke. James Brown, whatever James Brown, I can't think of the name of a record of his, but Bill Evans and Tony Bennett duet record. That's 5.
Yeah, you got the fusion.
That would keep me going for a while.
You got the traditional jazz. You got the fusion. You got the funk roots.
I'd have to sit and learn it all, man. I better have a keyboard there to learn it all. Yeah.
You still fool around with the Moog at all?
Absolutely, all the time. Now we have stuff in the box, which is a little easier, but I still have my mini Moog sitting right. I've got it racked up inside the rack in my studio, and I absolutely still use it. There's nothing like it, man. Nothing like it.
Was there anybody that you ever encountered that you were kind of starstruck about?
George Benson, probably. I think Benson was just because of what he's done and how I've tried to emulate him singing and just knowing that he's probably the best guitar player I've ever heard in my life. And I don't even play guitar, but he worked with all the greatest organ players, and that's another one. I guess I would. Could I get 6 records? Joey
Sure.
D. Francesco, please.
We'll call it an alternate for the 6.
Thank you. He's another one of the guys, and all those. I mean, there's so many records that I grew up listening to. I would love to have them all, but those were the most influential and the most dear to my heart. So, because it went from being a child up until now.
Sure.
So,
it's so great too that George is still out there doing it.
Well, it certainly sounds great too, man. He really does. So, pleasure,
Yeah.
Scott.
Likewise, on behalf of the viewers and listeners, thank you for all the beautiful music you've given us through the years.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it so much. And anytime you want to talk, I'm there. So let's do it again.
All right. Thanks, Ricky.
All right, Scotty. Take care of yourself.
You too, man.
All right, man. Thank
Bye.
you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Truth in Rhythm. A big thank you goes out to our guest as well as to you, the viewer and listener. Also, much gratitude to Pleasure for supplying the show's funky opening and closing music. As a reminder, you can always access the complete list of linked shows by episode at funkandstuff.net. I urge you to support this program and receive the extra benefits along with that by subscribing to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube and sharing it with funk, R&B, and jazz lovers, joining Truth and Rhythm's membership program at Patreon, submitting a donation at funkandstuff.net, buying Everything is on the One, the First Guide to Funk book at Amazon, shopping at the Funky Things store for cool merchandise at funkandstuff.net, and linking through funkandstuff.net for all of your Amazon purchases. In addition, if you're an artist or anyone seeking proven, results-oriented professional marketing, PR, writing, or editing consultation or production, check out the media services section at funkandstuff.net. Also, I encourage you to drop me a line at scottg@funkandstuff.net. I love the feedback, suggestions, guest requests, appearance and sponsorship inquiries, and just talking about my favorite subject, groove-based music. For now, and as always, this is Scott Dr. GX Goldfine saying, keep on vibing to the rhythm of the one.